All right. So what's your name and when and where were you born?
My name is Frank Atkins. It's spelled with an T instead of a D. Some people spell an A-D, and mine is A-T-K-I-N-S, like Chet Atkins.
Mm-hmm.
And I was born in Delaware, a town called Laurel, Delaware, on the East Coast. It's like in the middle Atlantic states. It's like Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia, and they call it Delmarva. So that's where I was born.
Ah. What year was that, if you don't mind me asking?
That was September 13th, 1943.
43.
43.
That was a different time. Do you remember much about life back then?
Well, I grew up on my daddy grew chickens. I grew up on a chicken farm, so we had chicken every Sunday for supper. So yeah, it was an interesting time. So.
Did you have lots of playmates around or siblings?
No, we lived about a couple, 3 miles out in the country from town. I had an older brother who was 3 years older than me, so at least I had somebody to play with. And people that lived close by, didn't have any children that we lived close to.
Right.
So luckily,
you guys just had to make your own fun.
Yeah, we made our own fun. So.
How'd you do that?
There was a woods behind where we lived, and there was swinging blinds, so we went back there and played Tarzan and Jane, and just swung on the vines, and once in a while, somebody down the road would have company, and they would, we knew the people, and they would have children, so they'd come down, and we'd have somebody else to play cowboys and Indians.
All right, kind of a special treat when another kid was around.
We lived in an old 2-story farmhouse. It had a porch that went all the way around, and it was back in those days. It wasn't insulated, no insulation, and of course my mama cooked on a cast iron stove, for a wood stove, and the staircase came down from upstairs, real narrow, to a landing, and then it was like 2 more steps down into the kitchen. So in the winter time we slept in feather beds.
Yeah.
That once you got in there, it just kind of wrapped around you. So it was warm. It wasn't wall-to-wall carpet, but we had carpet on the floor in the living room, but it wasn't wall-to-wall. So in the winter time, the wind would get underneath the house and come up through the cracks of the floor and lift those carpet up a little bit.
Oh gosh.
But we survived all that. So.
Did you ever pretend it was a ghost with a flying carpet?
My imagination hadn't really gotten started back then, not that much.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So I know from talking to you that your parents were older. Do you think maybe that's where part of your love of country music comes from?
Could have been, yeah. My daddy turned 54 in August, and I was born in September, and my mama turned 41 in December, so they were like grandparents. By the time I was the baby of the family. I had an older brother. He was like 16 when I was born, other than my 3-year older brother. And my mama had a girl in between, but she only lived for a couple months. She passed away. So, but whenever we would go in the car, my daddy always had country music on the radio. So that's where it all started back, with Ernest Tubb and Roy Acuff and a lot of the older artists.
Right.
Back in the 40s, 50s.
So how did you go from a childhood love of country music to chasing it?
Once I got grown and got out on my own, because back then no way of. They didn't really go to any concerts back then, you know. So once I got my license in a car, you know, I started going to Sunset Park in West Grove, Pennsylvania, which is just above. See, where we lived in Delaware, at the bottom, it was only 3 counties: it was Sussex, Kent, and Newcastle. So it was like a little over 100 miles from the south to the north of Delaware, the state of Delaware. You go all the way up, and then you get into Pennsylvania, and that's where West Grove, Pennsylvania, was where the Sunset Park was. It was in like a field, like a pasture, cow pasture, but there wasn't any cows around. But it was closed in, and then they had benches, you know, where people would sit, and country artists would come play there, anywhere from Hank Sr. on down to the latest artist that was traveling at the time. So I never got to see Hank there because he had done passed away. But I saw his daughter there, Jet Williams.
Yeah.
But she was born after, like 5 days after he died. So she never knew her daddy. But I've seen her there. I've seen Platt and Scruggs. Just a lot of older. I miss seeing Marty Robbins. He was supposed to play, and then he passed away, you know, a few months before he got to play there. So I never got to see Marty Robbins at concerts. But then, you know, I started going around where we lived and started going to Salisbury, Maryland, you know, at the Civic Center there. And it was like 30 miles south of where I lived. So they would be bringing in big acts there, like George Jones and big people like that. So it's kind of spread out from there.
Sounds like an interesting time.
Yeah.
And then in the midst of all this chasing country music, you got married. How'd that happen?
Well, my wife, she was originally from around Wilmington, Delaware, and her mom had left her daddy, came down to in the area where I was living, and got remarried again to a farmer. And then at the time, my wife to be was living with her grandparents, and she wanted to be with her mother, so she came down and started going to school, and that's how we met.
So did she ever go with you to the concerts and stuff?
Yeah, she liked the music. She liked country music, but she wasn't into it. Like, you know, after the concert, I would go around back, you know, and most of the time get to see the artists on their bus, or they would be coming out the back door, like the Judds. You know, one night, it was like January. And of course, I had my daughter with me, you know, because my son at the time, he was all grown up and gone off. I know I'm jumping ahead.
No, you're fine.
He already was in the Air Force when he was 19. So, but my daughter was with us, you know, and we would after the Judge got done playing, well, we got in the car and went around back and we watched the Naomi and Winona. They came out from the back. They had been doing an interview for a magazine back there, and so they got on the bus. And when they got on the bus, I thought Sue, my wife, I thought she was going to be with my daughter Crystal and I. I thought she was behind us, but we went up and knocked on the bus door, and here comes Winona, the daughter, you know. And well, my wife had gotten out when she seen Winona. But by the time she got up there, we were on the bus, and Winona had closed the door.
Oh, no!
And she didn't see my wife, you know, so we sat there and was talking to her, and then her mama come trotting down the hallway of the bus, you know, and she says, well, my feet's cold. I had to go put a pair of socks on. So we got our pictures made with them, and I saw Merle Haggard there, I saw George Jones. A lot of big name artists back then. Roy Clark.
Well, that's awesome.
You know, Mickey Gilley back in those days. And this was in the 60s. Yeah, 60s, 70s. So.
That sounds like a neat time.
Yeah, it was. It was a great time.
Most people don't want to tell me their stories of the 60s and 70s because there's some legal liability there, you know.
I remember most of them.
Well, it sounds like you passed your love of country music down to your kids, or at least tried.
Yeah, before my son went in the Air Force, we saw Johnny. He was like 12 years old. He was a big Johnny Cash fan. So we saw Johnny in June there one night, you know, and I had gotten him a book of Johnny Cash, The Man in Black, you know, and we went around back after the concert. We found out that they were going to drive out to the airport and fly back home and to Nashville, and the band was going to go on to the next gig. So we got out there and was able to meet with June and Johnny, and Mike got his picture made with Johnny Cash. So that was a big deal.
Right, that's awesome.
So when we saw George Jones, Mike was about the same age. He was probably about 13 or 14, because Crystal was about 6, because she was like 7 years younger than her brother, you know. So that was back in the day when George Jones was drinking a lot.
Yeah.
You know, and he was selling those T-shirts, you know, with a possum onto it, because that was his nickname. That a record label person had given him, because his face was sort of rounded and his nose was sort of shaped like a possum. So this record label guy called him Possum, you know. So he went by the name. So on this T-shirt that I got Crystal, it was a possum, and it said "No Show Jones," because he wouldn't show up to a lot of his gigs because he was drunk, you know. So we found out that he was going to go to the airport, and he was going to fly up to New York, I think, to do signing some papers for people, and the band was going on down to Virginia. So we were sitting there waiting for him when they pulled up. You know, the car pulled up that brought him to the airport like a limo, and we got out, and Mike opened the door to let George Jones out, you know, and he says, "How did y'all get here so fast?" No, he says, what was it he said? I forget what he said now. So anyway, he held Crystal, and he could talk like Donald Duck.
Mhm.
You know, he would talk words, you know, instead of like, but he would actually make words, you know, talking like Donald Duck. Of course, you could smell the beer on his breath.
Yeah.
But he was holding Crystal, you know, and he looked at her, and of course she had that long T-shirt on down to her knees. And he said, "You like Donald Duck?" And she said, "Yeah." So he started talking to her like Donald Duck. So
Aw.
that was another good experience.
Right.
And then one time we saw in the same place, we saw Waylon Jennings. You know, we were around back when the bus pulled up. You know, and Jessie Coulter, Waylon's wife, she got off first, and she walked by Crystal and patted her on the head and went on inside, and then Waylon, he come off. And when he came off, he seen Crystal, but she was about 5 or 6 at the time also. And he just reached down and scooped her right up, you know. And luckily, Mike had the camera, and he took a picture of Crystal and Waylon together. Aww. And she was 6 then, so we saw Waylon. We didn't see him anymore, I don't think, until Crystal was married, had her first child, was Timmy, and he was about 4 years old. That was his first concert. So we saw Waylon at Sunset Park, and we were there waiting for. I had this picture of Crystal and Waylon together, so I gave it to Waylon's bass player to take it on the bus and show it to Waylon. And at the time, he had both of his wrists operated on for carpal tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
He had both of them, both of them done, So they had the kind of buses both roped off. But we were lucky enough; we were the only ones to be allowed there at the bus door. So when Waylon came off, we he looked at Crystal and he says, "Is this you?" And she said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, you've grown up to be a pretty little girl, So we got a picture taken with my grandson, So I asked Waylon because I wanted to shake hands with him, and I didn't know that at the time he had his carpal tunnel operation until he told me. So I stuck my hand out to shake hands with him, and he said, I can't. That's when he told me. And I said, well, how come you had both done at the same time? And he said, because Jesse would have to go to the bathroom with me and wipe my butt. And I never have forgotten. That's what he told me.
That's
so
funny.
Over the years, I'll try to fast forward that I moved out here in 2005 in Arkansas, Greenwood. My daughter had moved out here with her husband. He wanted to move back closer to home, so they came out in '04. So while I was out here, I was able to go to a lot of concerts, and I went to see Shooter Jennings, Waylon and Jesse's son. And at the time, he was like 12 years old when he was at Sunset Park with his mom and dad, So I got to befriend him, and when he comes around close by, we get to hang out, go on the bus, we get to hang out and talk. So that's pretty neat. Same way with Merle Haggard's boys. I met Merle years ago, and when I was back in Delaware, and then I got to know Marty and Noel and Ben, his son from his last marriage. And when they come around, I get to hang out with the boys. So it's really great, to be able to know their dad and his music, and then just sit around and talk with him.
Keep a friendship with the
yeah,
family.
Keep a friendship with the boys, like with Shooter.
Right.
So that's. But I have a day job, believe it or not.
Well, you got to have a job to pay for all these concerts.
I'm retired. I turned 62 in September of '04, and we came out here. I was driving a truck back then, and we came out here, and a couple of years later, my wife said, well, actually about a year later, because I wasn't doing anything, and she said, you need to get a job and do something. So it's just we had moved in with our daughter, and so I came downtown to the area agency building on the square, because we were getting papers in the mail, and about retirement and this, that, and the other. And so I went in there and talked to the lady working in there. At the time, it was Deanna Rice.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe less than a year, went in there one day with some papers that I didn't understand. And she said, Frank, I'm going to be going over to the senior center and taking that over, And she said, I know you're retired, why don't you just come on over, And so we went over there and started eating lunch some days. And then a few months went by, and she said, I know you're retired, I need somebody to take the place of a man that just left. So that's how I got the day job at the senior center. So I've been there like 14 years.
Oh, wow.
So I deliver meals, like Meals on Wheels for people at home that can't get out. So
right.
And go to music on weekends.
Got to have a way to pay for it, huh? You are certainly one of the only over 60-year-olds I know that has broken his ankle at a concert.
Yeah, that was 3 years ago last month. I remember that. It was 2019. I went to Pensacola, Oklahoma, the casino. They had a stage there, and it was called Gillies. And there's a singer-songwriter named Brent Cobb from Nashville. He was coming there to play, and I really wanted to see him. His brother David Cobb is a real famous and a real good producer. producer in Nashville. So I wanted to see Brent. So I was sitting and watching the concert, and afterwards they went behind the curtain, and there was a green room there, what they call a green room, and I went over to sit on the booth over here by the stage so I could get to see him, and I didn't realize it, but he had gotten by. He came out and gotten by me. He had long hair, so what he had done, he had pulled his hair up underneath his cap, and I didn't know. I never noticed because the guy that came out looked like he had short hair. So I guess he went to the bathroom or somewhere. So I thought, so I went up on stage, and the stage is only like a foot high. So I went up there to talk to the drummer. So, and there's steps, about 2 steps here to go up on the stage. And I was up there talking to him, and I got done, and I came back, and there's cables. They run cables for sound and their speakers and everything, and microphones. So I got my left boot caught in one of those cables as I was coming off, and I went like this, and my right foot hit that big wide sliding door, and I knocked it off the rail, and it fell on top of me. So, but the only thing that happened was I broke my left ankle. Was all I.
Yeah.
And I never did get to talk to Brent.
And had a new story to tell.
Yeah. And a couple of years ago, luckily he came and played downtown Fort Smith in a venue called the Majestic.
Mm-hmm.
So I told him the story. I got to meet him there. So yeah.
Well, at least you finally got to meet him after going through all that.
Yeah, finally got to meet him. So we exchanged phone numbers, and we keep in touch when he's going to be coming close by. So
that's good. It is obvious you have lived a lot of life.
Yeah.
You have made the most of it.
Yeah, I enjoy my life. What I do, I get up every day, and I'm in this good a shape. Still able to work and support myself. And my wife, she's gone back to the East Coast to be with my daughter. Her and her husband are back there at the time. Now, I look for them to maybe move back out here because I have two grandsons. The oldest and the youngest have gotten married, and Timmy, the one lives in Conway. Or no, that's Tyler. Timmy lives in Oklahoma City, and Tyler got married last year, and he lives in Conway, Arkansas. So I have two, and so last February. My grandson in Oklahoma City, him and his wife had a little baby boy. So that makes him my great grandson.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in April of last year, Tyler and Karina, they got married up at Bell Park here in Greenwood. So, of course, Timmy came to his brother's wedding, and he had his little son with him, which is my great grandson. So he was only like 2 months old at the time. So and I hadn't seen him because COVID had kind of come crashing down on everybody.
Yes.
I never got it, but back there they'd gone through it, and so I never got to go out there and visit, and so. But last Sunday, his wife Marky, she has a aunt and uncle that live in Fort Smith. So they were coming there to celebrate Tripp's birthday at her aunt and uncle's house. And they call him Tripp because his name is Timothy Paul Van Brunt.
Oh, gosh.
Third. Instead of calling him that, they named him Tripp, which is a good nickname. So I was able to go see him for the first time since he's gotten to be a year old. And got some pictures taken. And here he is.
Oh, he's a cutie.
And that's right after I got there. so I was holding him, and the gifts and were on the table, and there's a pack of like there's about 8 big cupcakes in each pack, you know. So I set him on the table, and he started playing with those cupcakes, and he accidentally knocked them off on the floor, you know. So, but it was really my fault. And then Marky, my grandson's wife, her aunt came in, you know, and I said, I'm teaching him how to sit on your table. So, and last year when I was walking him around at Tyler's wedding, I was singing more Haggard songs in his ear, you know, trying to brainwash him. Yeah. With so this year I got to do the same. Here's a picture. Here's a picture of me holding. I sang him a couple of little Haggard songs.
Yeah.
The first one was, I think, was "Let's Chase Each Other Around the Room Tonight," and the second one was "Mama Tried." So, but Tim, my grandson, he listens to because he lives in Oklahoma, and he listens to red dirt music all the time. Mm-hmm. So my great Trip, he gets to hear music all the time. So that's good. So maybe he'll just grow up and be a singer.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, it would be. So,
if you had one piece of advice for him for the life that he's going to lead, what would it be?
For Trip?
Hmm?
Oh, that's a good question. Can we come back to that one?
We sure can.
So let me think about that a little bit.
Sure, I had one more for you.
I have something to tell him, but right now he's not understanding too many words, so yeah. I'm going to wait a few years to
understand.
So he'll understand.
So we'll skip that one and go to, how do you want to be remembered when you leave this life?
I try to be a good person, and I think I was meant to do what I'm doing now, to deliver meals to people that aren't as fortunate as I am in good health and everything, you know. And my daddy wasn't highly educated. He grew up on a farm, and of course he was born in 1889. So, but his daddy was a farmer, and back in those days they were called circuit rider preachers, where a preacher didn't have a church, but he would get on a horse and go to a town maybe on Sunday and preach, you know. But that's what his daddy done, you know. And he gave me a lot of advice. He went to school. He could read and write, you know, all that. I don't know what grade he quit it, but his daddy needed help out on the farm, you know. So back in those days, kids didn't always finish school. So, but he didn't have a lot of education, but he had a lot of common sense. Mm-hmm. And he would tell me, you know, use your head for something the size of a hat rack, which means think.
Yes.
Yeah. And
that's good advice.
Yeah. So, and one, I'm going to tell it anyway, you know, but people can take it ever how they want to take it, but he told me, you know, I don't just pertain to deer hunting or not, but he told me older bucks stiffer the horn.
No. That's funny, because I always heard what can't get up, can't get out.
yeah, that's one too, yeah, so I'll probably come up with something, you know, and another thing he told me was, you know, how to be respectful to people, especially older people, because I was around a lot of older people when I was growing up. You know, be respectful and always take your manners with you when you go.
Yes.
Yeah. Don't leave them at home. You know, so.
Sounds like you had lots of good advice.
Yeah, I did. I don't know. I'm sure I wasn't the only one that grew up with older parents. I learned to appreciate people. I would tell younger people Especially if their grandparents were close by. Spend as much time with it as you can. Because naturally, when I was born, there were grandparents on either side that done passed on. But I don't hold that against my parents.
Right.
Because back in those days, there was no Planned Parenthood, and I kind of, in a way, I kind of brag about my daddy being that old. So maybe that's where the old the buck stiffer the horn comes from.
Possibly.
I don't know.
Well, we thank you very much for joining us today.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely, and maybe we can get you back for a part 2 sometime.
Yeah, maybe I can come up with something to tell Trip.
Some profound advice.
From Paw, yeah.
Yeah.